Okay, thank you for coming back in. Hope you got a chance to get a bit of sugar and a cup of coffee. As we draw today's Rail Skills Forum to a close, we now turn to our final session, which is a panel discussion chaired by Caroline Walsh, who's the chair of the National Transport Commission. So this session is going to invite our panellists to reflect on the key insights, strategies and innovations presented through the day and explore what we can learn and apply from both domestic and international experiences. Caroline will be joined by the distinguished panel representing diverse expertise in rail skills development and reform, many of whom you've spoken or heard from today. Matthias and Angela from STAFA, Angela from VIDA, Neil, oh yeah, we found you, Neil, that's okay, great. Andrew and Graham from QR, and Mary Hetherington, where's Mary? No, you are, Mary. Mary Hetherington, Director of Competency and Learning at Transport for New South Wales. So together they'll explore the question, how can lessons from Australia and abroad accelerate rail skills development, enhance skills portability and support a modern, interoperable digital rail system? Thanks very much. Please come up to the...
I think we've got enough. No, I think it's just the Australians, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's just the Australians this time, Matthias, so you're down there. No, is that right? I'm right? Yeah, go away, you international lot, you've had your say. We're going to be Australian now. And pay no attention to international experience. I joke. I do joke. It's that bloody Neil. He puts me into this mood, don't you, Neil? Thanks, everybody, and thanks for your attention. I'm going to kick off with a few questions of the panel. The purpose of this session is to say, at the NTC, what we need to do is actually keep this momentum progressing in terms of our reform agenda. And what we've really enjoyed doing over the last couple of years with these types of forums, we've had 2 on skills, we've had a number on other things, is to bring out international experts to tease it up, let us know what's happening overseas, because as we all know, it's hard for us to get funding approval, and particularly in government agencies, to go overseas and visit them. So thank you very much for doing the 24 hours on the cigar tube and coming out to visit us out here. We really, really appreciate it. So this is an opportunity now for our Australian presenters to give their reflections on both what we've learned and to give their reflections on what we at the NTC, sort of on behalf of all of us, need to do to keep the momentum going with the reform agenda in this space. We've had a really rich day of information data, so I don't know about you guys, your head might be swimming a little bit. I don't want to start off with saying what does the future rail workforce look like in Australia, because we got a lot of that from today's discussions, but what we do know is going to need a lot more digital capability. We've got AI coming in. We do need to look for productivity improvements and always looking for improved safety. So I guess my first question is to go to that last session's endpoint, which is about rail either being a faster adopter. What's our pace of change with this? Do we stay back with the dinosaurs for a long period of time? Are we just behind the curve? So are we going fast enough but not too fast, if you like, in what we need to do to adapt our workforce to this? And Mary, I thought I'd kick off with you from Transport for New South Wales and New South Wales's perspective.
Cool. Okay, well, it's on. So one of the conversations that we were having at our table was about agile versus waterfall, and the fact that a lot of what you do in the digital space in IT uses agile methodologies and Scrum and that sort of concept of fail fast, and it's not about the contracts, it's all about the collaboration. And then you have the kind of projects that we do. So I think one of the challenges that I see a lot is, yes, because we are an industry that does really big, expensive, high safety risk things, we do move very, very slowly, whereas technology and digital is just constantly evolving so rapidly, and it worries me that that gap, that divide gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't know exactly how we fix that. I feel like Wagile and adopting some of those Scrum principles as part of it, doing small things faster, giving them a go, proving the use case, and then going, yeah, okay, we can make an argument to the accountants about it, and then we can go and do it bigger and better. I think that's probably a lot of it. Yeah.
And Angela, the point that you're making about how do you attract the youngsters coming in? If we stay, my concern is if we stay as the dinosaurs for too long and not be seen to be getting agile and faster, it'll just be longer and longer before we do get that excitement for the younger lot who are thinking in different ways. Just wonder whether you have any observations about our pace of change.
Yeah, I think there's a risk there. But they're also energised by so many other things in the rail industry. I don't think that it's a complete deal breaker. I think sustainability and environmental impact of rail is a really, really big attractant to a new generation. And I think that would be a key driver of a future workforce. And I know, and there's been plenty of forums run by, NTC and ARA where young people have been spoken to, and they've said, sustainability credentials are critical. So I think being technologically savvy is important, but it's not the end of the story. I think there's plenty of other ways we can attract people as well.
They still like Thomas the Tank Engine and Harry Potter.
I had a kid bring a Thomas the Tank Engine to one of our Rail Careers Immersion days where the kids get to try rail skills in a safe environment, and he bought a Thomas the Tank Engine. So yes, they still do love Thomas the Tank Engine.
It was one of the biggest concerns with Rail GPT was it was going to return Thomas the Tank Engine answers to questions people asked. True story.
That goes to the data quality issue, isn't it? How much data's around in the past.
I have a slightly different view on where we might go. And some of the things we've done some simulations of activities on the rail network, specifically associated with Cross River Rail. So we don't necessarily get access to the tunnel that's under construction and so much of the time with testing and things. How can we simulate that environment? We already had the 3D world. We used Unreal Engine, started to add some layers across the top of that and ran things through. So I do think we can create these sandbox environments and have simulation areas to test and do things. And one of the things we did was a SARC, just so everyone knows we're getting in through there. We also do working in electrified territory, wet training as well. So we can start to do that and put people through those areas and get the benefits of it. So from an adoption point of view and the concern about regulatory requirements and we're putting anyone at risk and stuff, being able to create synthetic data and these worlds where we can go and test and play and learn, I think it allows us to progress quickly without exposing us to any risk at the moment.
Yeah, I might come back to the safety stuff in a second. Oh, sorry, Mary, you go.
I wanted to build on that because one of the things that when we're talking about collaboration and working nationally, that I'm always really grateful that I work in a large government department, so we have such a huge amount of data. We have IT specialists, we have operational specialists, and I have to keep remembering that when we're looking at the industry and we're looking at small training providers or we're looking at the suppliers, the higher education, they don't get necessarily access to the same things. So what I think would be really cool is if we could share some of our data and some of our environments and our infrastructure and let everybody use it. And I'm sure they'd pay some money for it, so it would be fine. And that, I think, would drive us forward a lot faster, because a lot of what blocks us is that we don't have the access to bits of the puzzle.
Yeah, and then we've almost got a lack of, and I'll get to this in a little while, that lack of a national governance arrangement to facilitate that and to encourage that. The point about where do the incentives come from and are they aligned? Yeah. We heard on Tuesday morning from Oxford Economics about just the challenges for Queensland in the next little while, about you're probably the area with not just the Olympics but a range of growth projects up there. Can you broaden out, Graham, the where you're at the moment in terms of your future rail technologies? What's the name of your skills academy? And is that really there to address this broader need that you've got for the not just digital AI, but just generally the number of people that you're going to have to recruit in the rail sector and make sure you've got their skills sorted for the next 10 years?
Thanks, Carol, I'm glad you asked. So the Future Skills Academy is really in its infancy. The scenario we're testing at the moment is reskilling existing employees into in-demand roles. So in that respect, we're addressing current capability deficits, but we're doing so by using our own internal employees, increasing internal mobility. The scenario that we've not yet tested, and we'd like to, is future focused, and that is the digital, that is the AI. And if I could just come back to a point that Andy said to me when I was scoping out, said to Andy, mate, can we get AI as our next kind of experiment, if you like, because there's a lot of it coming through just now. And it's kind of like, mate, you just can't use a broad brush with AI and hope that you're going to get something that comes out of it. You need to be nuanced. It needs to get results and specific to what it is that you're trying to achieve. So, but back to your question, Carolyn, at the moment we haven't got there yet, but that's our intention, is to scale it up to be able to new, emerging and future.
Excellent. Now, I want to get onto the national agenda, because what we heard a lot about today and the scene setting over the last couple of days, and certainly what the NRAP program is about, is recognising that at the moment, leaving it to every individual railway employer to do the skills development training of their employees and not be linked to some sort of national set of competencies is the biggest challenge we have, and is the biggest opportunity in terms of unlocking some productivity improvements in Australia. And that's why, as I mentioned the other day, for those who are here, ministers have already agreed to develop a national set of competencies in rail. The how we do it and the detail of it is really the next bit of work we need to do in the policy reform. So I just be, from your perspectives as people who have to try and get the outcomes you're getting in your individual organisations, any insights you've got for us about what we should be doing at the national level to try and leverage, Angela, the work that you're doing there, rather than having every other state or jurisdiction trying to replicate what you're doing, as opposed to, use all the data together and build it up. So any observations about what we should do in the national space, or how we should go about building that national set of competencies?
I guess I can say that the evidence is that the Training for the Future model was quite effective in getting outcomes by everyone collaborating effectively, and having experts looking at what needs to be done so operators can get on with their daily operational concerns, but then still contributing to the process. So is that a collaborative effort at the national level amongst people? And, does that mean that there is shared budgetary responsibility? I mean, these are all things that could be explored for sure. In Victoria, we kept the model to people who were very specifically rail operators and rail project officers, but is there an opportunity for manufacturers or, people who are more on the private sector part to take part? Well, absolutely. I think the model's sound and worth exploring.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. Just to add to that, so if I think back when I came back to Queensland Rail the second time, that rail industry worker was in full swing, and that's through the ARA and the development of the national matrices. So it's not as if that hasn't been some really great work, and the processes that they've used to collaborate across the jurisdictions to get at a minimum level certain discipline matrices that are common across both. Now, there might be some complexities when it comes to safe working, so perhaps I shouldn't have gone there. But I think that we have a process that can work, and I would say let's look at what we've already done, and then maybe look at what's the really easier stuff, less difficult stuff, most difficult stuff, and perhaps tackle the things that we know that we think we can get the win with first.
I think that's right, and I think the challenge that we've got is to also recognise that there are some things that we can't harmonise in terms of skills until we harmonise the system, which is why the whole debate about interoperability is so important, because we will always have, different thing to, train driver driving through a conventional signalled area has to follow a different set of rules than going through a future digitised area. So we'll need that until we get those other reforms in play as well. I'm going to throw to a couple of people in the audience, if the people with the mics don't mind, just on this, to talk about the national stuff. Fiona, from what we did learn from our European colleagues this morning and from what other people have said is this is a partnership between industry, who has to lead this, the education sector, and governments backing this sort of stuff. So I'm going to start with you, Fiona, from an industry point of view at the ARA and the work that you have been doing on those matrices about, you know, how and we know you're working very closely with the NTC, but share some of those insights with the broader audience and where you're at with that.
No, music to my ears, Graham, and Paul Walsh too, because we do...
Paul, I'm throwing to you next, by the way.
Yeah, get ready, Paul. We do have a lot of things, and that's why, you know, when we've got ministers agreeing to a national set of competencies, that's very nice because they've been there for 30 years. We have national units of competence, we have national qualifications, but what we do is build the curriculum within our own organisations, RIMs or rail operators, so much it's so bled into with the specifics of an employer group that you can't take that somewhere else. Whereas if you think about most occupations, remember we actually have occupations now, not just roles, we're a proper industry. You know, you don't get trained to be the hairdresser for Hunters Hill on the corner, you know, you are trained to be a hairdresser. So we really need to make sure people have qualifications. One, because it does give us a common standard. You know, there's concerns about quality, but the fact is ASQA has very rigorous quality standards, and you can add another one for Victoria and WA. They've got a TACN or something else. So there's plenty of regulators in this space to assure quality. But I really think we need to step up and realise we have qualifications. Rail's the biggest user of skill sets in the country. We already know that we don't want to give people this when they only need this. And we need to build generic curriculum. And who is that we, and where does that sit?
Yeah, Paul, any insights? I don't know whether it's... this isn't my area of expertise, so where's Paul? Over there. There you are, Paul. You're behind the lectern. Yeah, so where do you see that happening, Paul, for the rail industry and the building of the curriculum?
So, yes, that's always the challenge for us, is talking about the difference between curriculum and occupational standards, skill standards that we develop. So our responsibility sits explicitly with the development of those standards that underpin the units of competency and form qualifications. The curriculum sits outside. That said, because curriculum is actually how you deliver it. For us, there's always the opportunities to do some of that, but if we did that for all of our industries, that's probably all we'd do. So the idea is designed in the system is that training providers are responsible for that. That's their opportunity to create a market edge, to do things better, to deliver in a way that suits their industry stakeholders who they're trying to develop a market for. It allows enterprise RTOs to do it how they want to inside their organisation to their... It's getting late in the day. I haven't had a beer. Specific needs.
Soon.
Specific needs. So that, yeah, but again, it's against that national standard, so that creates the transferability.
But it's the curriculum that moves the standard into a competent person.
So it's the combination of both, yeah.
In most industries, we would have tape delivering that curriculum.
Yeah.
They would develop a common curriculum for an occupation. We've got quite small bespoke RTOs,
Yeah.
or we are ourselves our own enterprise.
So that's I'm looking for, you know, in the old days I was an economist, which surprises people because I wasn't a very good one. But it's what, as an economist, I would call the market failure. We somehow have something here in rail that is a market failure where we're failing to get that to be developed on our behalf. Now, I suspect it's because we've grown up as a whole lot of, you know, up to the last 20 years, a whole bunch of state government-owned railways and did it ourselves because we were big and ugly. And as we've now restructured as a railway, it's not fit for purpose.
I'll say what I think, but
yeah,
that's called protectionism. Sorry, that's just rail industry holding their own.
Yeah. Oh, and you know, I want to move on then to some of the insights from Europe. And one of the things I really loved out of, I think it was Matthias and Angela's presentation, was the thing about a European mindset. And isn't it funny that we are one country, and yet I don't think we do have an Australian mindset. We, you know, I think, was it you, Keith? It is Keith, isn't it? Yeah. Who once said, you know, there's the right way, the wrong way, and the railway. And You know, so I think that is culturally something that we've really got to shift. I'd just be interested in my colleagues' views about that comment. But also, let's start with the staffer model. Any observations or things that we can get from that struck you from that international experience?
Can I just say that I loved that one EU mindset? That was the thing I wrote down in capitals on my notepad. But I really loved what the working party put together, then had to achieve out of well, what they had to do to deliver that, and there was a cultural competency piece around that, and I found that fascinating because we don't really tackle that at all here. And whereas obviously it's a very different cultural environment, I was just thought that maybe is that the missing piece? Is that do we need to develop that to develop a sense of a unified Australian mindset? And it got me really thinking, and then I had a cake because I needed some sugar.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Any other comments on that? Oh, it's Mary and then Andy.
The thing I found really interesting about what Staffer was saying was that they were developing curriculum within 4 years, and I was like, how'd you do it so fast? That's like nothing when you're doing stuff between large organisations, which, you know, was a little bit depressing actually.
Yeah. I think we can do things faster if we do have an Australian mindset about and actually understand what the imperatives are. But I think that's the challenge of getting the imperatives right. Andy? All good? Graham, any observation?
No, they said everything that I was...
Can I just add in one thing, Carolyn? I was fascinated also by the idea, I don't know why I picked on this, zeroed in on this one specific item about drivers being that they effectively are entry-level roles in the EU, which is a very, very different situation here, and that they're pegged at the EQF level of 3 to 4, which is a school leaver. And I was fascinated by that because that is absolutely not the case here. And I'm intrigued to think, are there barriers to making that so here? Or I can think of a few of those barriers, but what is that cultural difference that means that there's these different perceptions of how this one role is seen and trained so differently?
Yeah. The question, Danny?
Yeah, it's a great point. I was thinking the same thing again, military background, totally different context. But
Just the mic behind you.
so the point remains, you have some young men and women out there who are at the wheel of multi-million-dollar assets, no different to a train, I suspect. Maybe I'm wrong, so forgive me if I'm a bit naive, but imagine a helicopter, imagine a warship. These guys are not 18, 19, 20, responsible for that asset, many millions of dollars. So akin to that point, and the EU best practice potentially for us who are looking to pave the way, I do believe we probably have to question the norms in this room to go, well, what is possible, and maybe our identity as a sector needs an upgrade.
Yes, I think that that change in this space is actually is difficult because some cultural issues, some historic issues, some legacy issues over investments that have been made, that we won't be able to do some changes and upgrades until we actually get some investment in some parts of different railways. And I think that we've got a great opportunity then to look at things differently. But because we do everything by individual railway, that's sort of the problem. That even if within a railway you start getting more innovative and thinking of things in a different way, how do we think about things collectively in the interest of the industry as a whole, or even the standard gauge network as a whole? To think about the train driver who has to know that a red over green means a different thing in Victoria than it does in New South Wales. So there are some challenges there. Mary?
One of the things that's come out of observations today was about in the rail industry, once you're in, you're in. Like, it's very hard to come in, do it for a few years and then go out again because you can't really transfer our skills out. And I think that drives part of our culture and our perception of things, is because I think people are aware that they don't have that same sort of robustness and job security that they might in another pathway. Hello? oh, okay, swapsies. So I think that ties into sort of, do young people want to come into the industry? But it also ties into, is it attractive for people here and do they want to keep going? And one of the things that someone said earlier was about, you know, train drivers maybe become train drivers because they don't want to talk to people as much. And it made me think about how many people got into rail as a career 20, 30 years ago because it wasn't digital and they weren't going to have to deal with computers. And are they still here in the workforce, and are they resistant to the change because it's not what makes them happy and that's not the kind of job that they want?
It does occur to me on that basis that actually one of the big skill set we do need in rail is change management skills. You know, it's actually, I don't think we're going to be able to get this, you know, you can bring new folk in, the little digital natives as they are now, who, as Neil was saying, think, you know, oh, I'll just follow the technology. But for those not even as old as I, you know, there can be resistance, even if it's just resistance through ignorance, because you just don't know what it is that it can do. So, and I don't know that we have great change management skills in some railways, but, you know, you are the railway people, so I'd be interested in your views about whether change management is there on your agenda as some of the skill set we need if we're going to make these shifts to a new digital world.
I think it's certainly something you need to pull out of your toolkit for even the work that we're doing now, and by necessity learning it or drawing upon others who have that skill set. But really, I think to get the best results on your projects, to bring them to life and bring people along, is that everyone pretty much to greater and lesser degrees needs to be a change manager. And so, you know, you can grow that. How do you grow that capability? And part of it is getting the experience to do that, but taking responsibility for it at the same time and learning it yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and then finding out when someone gets back to you because you haven't kept them in the loop. You know, like it's just, I don't think it's particularly scientific. It's just like, I'm doing something, it has an impact. Who does it impact? When does it need to get done by? Who needs to know about it?
And actually, that's a very good point, because we are all change managers, and yet I think that we sometimes have a perception that we're going to get the change management expert over there somewhere to come in and help us with the change management, and it's not that easy.
Always fails. We've got, you know, back in the day, certainly in New South Wales, we've had change managers since the mid-90s. There's one of them I would have paid. I mean,
Oh, I hope if there's any change managers in the room, it's you.
There may or may not be.
But it's not the change managers, it's being a change agent, I think. It's not being the profession of a person who does that for a living. It's all of us being willing and open to give it a go and play with it. Like my boss, who's been in the railway as long as I've been alive, is playing with Copilot and going and getting it redoing his emails and sharing that and that enthusiasm with all the people around you. Like it can be done. You can be an agent.
Great.
I was leading the driver training when we bought the Millennium trains into New South Wales, which were the first digital train, and that's why I think training. That's why I'm excited about what you're doing, because you need to reflect in the training they need to experience at the very least some of the technologies, and that's not just drivers; it's everyone. But I always found it even then funny. This is before this century, where we didn't have laptops back then, but we had computers, and we set up a training room at Everleigh. And I remember Nick Lewocki took us to the thing the cushions were too soft for guards. Anyway, they would be putting the drivers. In those days, people didn't have computers in their homes. Their kids didn't have computers. The mice are on the screen, but you know, it all happened, and they got out and they drive Millenniums perfectly safely, and they've been able to then go into, not Millenniums, sorry, it was Millenniums, that's right, and then Waratahs, and now all these other newer trains. So people go, just like we get a new iPhone and we think, oh my God, you know, do I really have to change phones? You have to learn so much. But it's the same with technology in the workplace. It's not suddenly a different place. It's an iterative thing, and you're allowed to make mistakes and you get it right. And it's the same with ATP. When that came in, we had 300 drivers trained one train. Of course they lost. Their training just dribbled away, as IT training does. So the timetable went to crap. So then we just sent them a little thing on their phones. Naughtily didn't ask the union, but they obviously looked at it because the timetable recovered within 3 days. It just took them through the YouTube steps of what to do. Anyway, I agree with you. Sorry.
There you go. Any other reflections on that point, Andy?
I'm probably just going to take a 30,000 foot view here, and the conversation was what's it going to take for the industry to really see a change. And I'm not sure I know the answer and I can simplify things, but I do think two of the things that resonate to me from other industries is a charismatic leader and funding. Now, whether it's Andrew Forrest and what he's done in iron ore and BHP and Rio are doing their own things, but he really brought it to a fore, hydrogen, green energy, those sorts of things. Elon Musk and what he's done in numerous industries we all know about. Winston Churchill. I mean, you can pick these great figures that can rally people to a cause and have the funding to do it. And I think the industry, from the short time I've been in it, I've found they're very welcoming in other places to sort of say, yeah, we're doing this, but they're never asking, what are you doing? How do we take that back? I don't think there's a desire to learn. And I think the more any organisation can go, why can't we do it that way? So as Queensland Rail, why can't we do it the way New South Wales or Melbourne's doing it? Why are we doing it? Or why is WA not right? Is probably the challenge. We're too busy to say we've got it right. So it will take someone very charismatic like Neil over there to come over here and lead us,
Neil, can we
lead us
clone
out
you?
of the problem.
Bring you over here. But in a way, that picks up Paul's point about that won't happen if we're all very protective of our own railways. I want to move to a very positive note, though, on this regard, is that I think we are seeing a sea change very quickly in rail in Australia along this lines of an Australian mindset. Everybody in the rail industry might not have seen it as yet, but I think it is happening, and it's happening because, as we've mentioned on a couple of occasions under the NRAP program, people like Natalie Pelham, myself, Jess, others have been banging on for years about the need for reform in rail, and there was sort of like this thing, no, we don't need to reform, it's all good. We've got a single national regulator, reform done. And it has only really been in the last 4 or 5 years that there's been a really... Oh, no, it's not done. It's not done. We still have 8 different rail infrastructure managers managing that standard gauge network, and they don't talk to each other. They don't work together to actually simplify network rules. They're not thinking about single rule books or training programs or anything so that we can actually get those efficiencies. And that goes to the safety of the workers on that network in terms of their task loads, human factors issues, all that sort of stuff. So I'm really pleased to say we had a great session with the RTBU's executive team. I wasn't there, but Sandra and her team were there to brief them about this. There's a lot of support for this reform at the worker level, I think. They are really wanting to see this reform because it'll be a better workforce, a better place to work, more transportability of skills and all that sort of stuff. But I also think that that's happening at the national level, and my colleagues in the room like Lockie and Dush and others around the room would know, we now at the moment actually have numerous ministers, not all because some are relatively new, all secretaries of transport departments, the head of ONSA, head of the NTC, Michael and I, RISB, the head of them knowing that they need to reform and change to play a new role in rail in the standard setting space. And we've had a Rail Safety National Law Review which has said we are going to gazette the National Network for Interoperability, and we're going to put regulatory hooks into that will mean that there will be regulatory incentives at least for the railways to finally cooperate and work together, including in governance arrangements about being able to provide assurance to the regulator around any investments they make around, for instance, digital systems, that they will be compliant with the mandated standards. I think that those sort of things will get us away from just relying on cooperation, which I don't think is enough. We need some real drivers to actually underpin that cooperation in the future, because we're just in a nice bright spot at the moment where we do have leaders across the industry who are very, very committed to these reforms at the minute. But we all know that that can fall away very quickly if you get a few changes in personality. So I think we are on a really, really strong place for reform. And I do think that today has been a great input into our policy thinking about what that could look like in skills going forward to address some of the challenges And I don't know that we've got all the right answers yet, but I think that we at least are starting to ask the right questions and know that we've got a problem. You can't fix anything if you don't know you've got a problem. So I am quite optimistic that we'll see some, real improvements there. But that's just me. I am a Pollyanna. Yeah.
Sounds like you're our charismatic leader.
Oh, I was going to say, I can get my tap dance shoes on soon, and rah rah. So I'm just going to ask, we're at 3:51, we are going to absolutely wrap up at 4. I'm just going to ask for any last observations from each of my panellists about the day, your key takeaways. If you had the wand, is there, I know there's no single answer for any of these big complex issues, but what would be your key takeaways today and or if you had the wand? Graham?
I think everyone's before me's said it very eloquently. And if I just stay in my lane, I guess, with the Future Skills Academy, we value keeping our employees in the company, and we also understand that the role you're in today may not be around or required tomorrow, and that we're using some science and structure process to get people into those roles that we need. And into the future, I think that we'll reposition people according to the requirement and the skill that we need, rather than say we want a person in a certain position to a certain capability level. And we'll also have capability defined at an enterprise level, and we'll have training that's plugged into that. And so when we know what's required, we can then make sure that a person's qualified to what they need, not everything else. And there was some common threads that was sort of getting across there. And just repositioning those people to meet the need at that point. So that's it.
Thanks, Ray. Andy?
I've had a real buzz. I've really enjoyed today. I kind of wonder what I missed in the previous 2 days, to be honest. But it's been great. It's been great hearing and learning from the EU, who seems to be a little bit ahead of us. I think we kind of know what's coming from a challenge around the people. It's good to see some data points on that, rather than just I think this is happening. The data's showing us this is there. I think it's very positive, and the more we can do these sorts of things and share, the better.
Excellent, thank you. Angela?
I've learned a lot today. I think my big key takeaway is it's good to recognise a lot of the things that we're doing right or progressing in a good direction. Particularly, Neil, thank you. I was in stitches all day, thank you. But also, you spoke about procurement and generation of social value, and that's a key interest of mine, because obviously I play in that space, and it's good to see that what we're doing is a similar approach, and these are ways that we drive real innovation, but also real social outcomes, which I think are some things that we forget about what we do in rail sometimes, is that we just have such a huge impact on people, and that public transport in general is so critical to the functioning of societies. Wow, this is getting lofty. But it's wonderful where just the simple power of putting things like model clauses or contractual requirements as the government into contracts to be delivered by customers very clearly drives outcomes. And I would just love seeing that it's being demonstrated around the world that's powerful. And I think that there's lots more we can do there in the future, which will drive some of the social and diversity outcomes that we really want to see, and see those people reflected in our workers in rail, I think, is a natural flow-on effect of that focus. So I was really thrilled to see that.
Great. And we have got our rep, is it Zan from ONREC, who's here today? She had to leave a bit earlier? Yeah, because that relates to, and again, I should have mentioned Jackie at the head of ONREC, Tim Reardon at the head of Infrastructure Australia. We've just got leaders across the country at the moment who have got a real passion for rail, because in that ONREC space is where we get into the national procurement framework that actually does start to encourage, and national approach to driving harmonisation in standards to drive down costs, all that sort of stuff. So I agree. Mary?
Leadership, governance, regulation, they're all awesome things, but we don't need those. We could just do some stuff ourselves, right? Like, if we all have the Australian cultural mindset, let's just steal stuff from each other. No, let's collaborate. So I am going to be talking to you because I'd really like to go set up sort of a rail academy within New South Wales and then maybe get some of your content. And I really like the idea of taking some of our existing workforce and, you know, making them more mobile because I think we need that. So if anyone wants to come and have a talk about that afterwards, we'll work out how we're going to go talk to the accountants and get the money for the New South Wales Rail Academy. Let's not wait for the NTC to make it happen for us. Let's just do it, eh?
That's
my
beautiful.
thought.
And if you do, we'll come in behind you and find the instruments that we need to do to lock it in. Because that's actually, then you need to lock it in and make sure that it keeps on happening, which is good. And I do agree with you that the governance and stuff is important. But I also want to say we are not waiting on this. It will take us a year or two to get changes to legislation through to lock in some of this interoperability stuff. But we're not waiting. We've got an interim configuration control board of the major RIMs already working together to make sure that they're comparing notes on their ETCS rollouts. We've got a subcommittee of them looking at skills and things to make sure we're thinking about that. I think a thing that we should be aiming for in the future is to say, as we roll out digital systems in Australia and the ETCS technologies, we don't all start bespoking our own training programs based on that. If we could at least start from a greenfield technology and make sure we adopt a national approach, that would be a good start. All right, look, thank you, everybody. I'd really like to, just before I throw back to Claire, and I know that you'll probably do this as well, there are some big thank yous, just as the chair of the NTC, that I'd like to make. Firstly, to all of you for taking the time for coming and sharing your insights. Really want to thank our international speakers for coming so far. Angela, Matthias and Neil, thank you so much for your insights and contributions. Our locals, another Angela, Paul, Graham and Andy, thank you so much. Your insights have been absolutely terrific today. Claire, thank you so much for being a very capable MC for the day. And can I just give a shout out to the NTC crew who, along with their partnership with the ARA, do just such a great job in pulling these events together. And I just think collectively in this collaboration over the last 3 days, it's just been a really rich opportunity to get you professionals together to have this national Australian mindset conversation about rail. So thank you all very much, and I'll hand back to our MC.
Okay, thank you, Caroline, and that fantastic team of panellists. Sorry for scaring in at everyone over there who thought I was dragging them on, lost the plot. It's nearly the end of the day. Get me that wine. Okay, it's clear from today's presentations and conversations and the final panel that while the challenges are really complex and the opportunities are real, there's a real will to work together, and we saw that, Mary. Thanks for your great words there. So before we wrap up, I'd just like to say, take a few moments to reflect on what we've heard today, acknowledge the work already underway, and consider how we continue this momentum beyond the room. We've explored how international collaboration, particularly, for example, through the Stafffer project in Europe, is helping harmonise rail education and training across borders, and what lessons that offers us here in Australia. I think that concept of a European mindset, and I remember when I first saw your presentation a couple of weeks ago, it's gold. It really is very compelling for many of us here who see that fragmentation across Australia and coming from what was Europe, no longer Europe, the UK. You kind of go, if you can do it in 13 countries, we must be able to do it here. So to see something like a single Australian rail area, a single Australian mindset is something that for me, across the mutual recognition, would really help support us get to that place. From the UK, we've seen the vital role of data in shaping workforce planning and rail skills development. I think Neil's message was really clear that to really realise the productivity benefits of emerging technologies, we must invest now in training, upskilling and workforce planning, underpinned by standardisation, digitalisation and those fit-for-purpose contracts that give enough time for contractors to really, a supply chain to really engage and deliver against that. Here in Australia, we've seen equally strong leadership and, Angela's presentation highlighting the success of the Training for the Future programme, not just as a schools initiative, but as a broader framework for connecting infrastructure projects with workforce development, equity and future-focused skills. So the emphasis on embedding long-term skills planning into project delivery is a model for other jurisdictions to consider. And Angela, particular thanks from me as another social procurement geek for bringing up that piece of the jigsaw puzzle, because I will always say, you know, it's clever stuff, because what you do is you deliver capacity, capability, you support businesses, and you get these great social outcomes. So why wouldn't you? So more social procurement is what we need. Okay, from Queensland Rail, great presentation. We saw how AI is beginning to be actively trialled and deployed to support competency mapping, workforce planning, and cross-skilling of operational staff. Your efforts to develop digital workforce tools that improve visibility of skills and enable more agile workforce development are a strong example of practical innovation aligned to future need. It felt like the FSA example was a real example of how many of those 6 elements that you talked about, Neil, to support and achieve productivity are already there. So if we could take that and we can achieve standardisation, mutual recognition and fit-for-purpose contracts, we could see some real gains. And the question is, how would we scale up that FSA model to something that we could see across the country? So these are powerful examples of where work with policy, training and technology align. There's no doubt that achieving interoperability, not just of systems, but of skills and people, is a really complex task. But we can see today that that's actually achievable and people are willing to collaborate and work together. It requires clarity of purpose, national consistency, and above all, a shared mindset, one that shifts from that fragmented approach to collaborative solutions. So I'd just like to thank again, Caroline, you've given your help. Thanks to everybody. To our panellists and presenters, thank you for your clarity, your candour, your humour, and your expertise. And to everyone here today, thank you for your commitment to shaping a rail sector that's future-ready, one that's safer, smarter, more inclusive, and more connected, both across jurisdictions and with the communities we serve. And again, just to mention again, before we part ways, please join us for a networking session, which is, I think, just outside the room. Continue those conversations for today, from today, share more ideas, collaborate, and have a glass of wine. Safe travels, and we look forward to continuing these conversations through action in the future. Thank you.